Okay, I'm going to talk to you about the inclusive design processes that we use at the Royal College of Art, and I've already been asked, what on earth Royal College of Art? What will the Royal College of Art have to offer to the business of healthcare, which is complicated and has to work properly? Well, the fact is that 80% of the graduates, the postgraduates, the master's graduates from the Royal College of Art are designers, not fine artists. And some of them are actually interested in designing solutions to other people's problems or challenges and not just doing something that looks cool. I actually work at the Helen Hamlin Centre for Design. It has its roots in a project in the mid-80s where Helen Hamlin, because she noticed that her mother was starting to get older, she noticed how bad product design is for older people, and she is a designer herself. She trained at the Royal College of Art some years ago, and she funded a project called Design Age, which was to alert the design industry and the manufacturing industry to the challenge that was coming with the demographic bulge that we're now very aware of. She was one of the first people to spot it. So the early projects were about an accessible car for Saab and accessible packaging for Safeways, which you can take off the shelf easily and take the lid off easily. Over the years, that original thinking has led to the realization that it's not just elderly people who need to be considered specially. Getting older is a process of having mild disabilities. I know that already. And the business of disability has moved us into thinking about healthcare and, of course, patient safety. But inclusive design clearly is, in its definition, is just about designing stuff that works, regardless of people's ability or personal problems or challenges and so on. It's very interesting when you actually look at ability or disability. If you look at the top line there, you can see the huge number of people have some hearing difficulty. If you contrast that with the very, very bottom one there, those are the people who are actually deaf. So the question about hearing disability is a spectral problem. It's not a binary on-off kind of thing. And in between those positions on hearing, then there's a whole range of other conditions that we have to think about. This slide really is just drawing attention to the fact that as designers, most designers tend to design for somebody who's like themselves. But actually, for inclusive design, we have to look at people who are outside of the mainstream and in the margins, as it says there. And by considering those people, then we have a chance of designing things that work for them. The thing about inclusive design is that it doesn't rely on huge numbers of respondents, like market research. It doesn't rely on big N numbers. It doesn't rely on very simple, clumsy questionnaires. It relies on maybe talking to quite a small number of people, maybe 12 people, but actually at a level that uncovers insights that really teach you something as a designer. And by walking the walk with those people, actually living in their life and in their environment and seeing the challenges they face, that gives us a chance of designing for them. But this point about percentiles, this is a kind of mechanistic approach to human factors. Well, if we design something that works for 90% of Americans, it actually only works for 10% of Vietnamese people. So percentiles are not a completely capable tool for directing us. This is rather a small slide to see. There'll be a copy of it for you, but it explains the difference between people-centered design and number-centered design. We've created a website called designingwithpeople.org, which helps designers to understand how to do ethnographic and empathic research. So techniques on how to observe without kind of interfering with the process that's going on, how to shadow people and so on, and how to get these insights that I'm talking about. The other part of inclusive design is that we operate to a philosophy or methodology called Double Diamond, which was articulated by the Design Council in the UK in 2005. And the difference between the Double Diamond method and the, if you like, the consulting commercial design approach that I did for 30 years before going to the centre is that the commercial approach starts here with a design brief that's been produced by somebody about something, and we just open things out creatively and then focus them down and deliver something. The point about the Double Diamond is that we spend as long before we have a design brief as we do designing for it. So we immerse ourselves in the environment, talking to the people, all of the stakeholders, clinicians, patients, floor sweepers, whoever it is, to get a really big understanding, really deep understanding of what their environment is. And then I'll come over this side this time, and then we work with those people. Oh, is there a pointer? Fantastic. Okay.
Go ahead.
All right. Okay. Well, this area, yeah. So we work then with the people that we've been observing and spending time with to just look for what are the things that come together out of the insights that came out of the research work. And by looking for threads in those insights, we're able then to focus down, working with the users of whatever is going to be designed, to make what we call an evidence-based design brief. And that's the difference between what I used to be as a commercial designer and what I am now as an inclusive designer. I'll give a few short examples. This project was about solving the problem of patient flow through acute medical units. And the problem there is it's quite an intense environment. There's a lot going on. People are focused on what's critical and what's acute, but they may fail to notice that some lab test results have come back 4 hours ago, and the patient has been lying there in the bed for 4 hours when they could perhaps have been moved on. So this slide represents the immersive study. I've jumped ahead to sort of the solution that comes out of working using the Double Diamond methodology. And this simple map actually shows what the process is through an acute medical unit. So it starts as a linear process, the normal sort of things that you would expect happening, and then you go into a possibly iterative situation where you're asking for tests, having a look at tests, thinking what needs to be done, maybe going round and round before you move the patient on and either send them home or out to a ward. The final solution here is in two forms, a digital whiteboard and also in an analog form, a board on a wall for hospitals that don't have the information technology infrastructure. And this will give a ward manager or a nurse manager a snapshot, if you like, of which patients are ready to be discharged, how many patients are waiting to come in, and so on and so on. And this is completely visible to everybody, including the patient. Second project I'll talk about concerns intensive care. The immersive research showed that there are 10 factors that strongly influence the experience that the patient has through intensive care. And the 4 important ones are orientation, the help or hindrance that relatives can add to the process, communication, and disturbed thinking and hallucinations. That work has led to the creation of an app called Senso, which is loaded and personalized for each patient, either by the patient themselves if they're an elective patient going to go into intensive care, or by family, relatives, friends, and so on, if it's an emergency case. And the various screens of Senso, once we've programmed it with the preferences of images, sounds, music, smells, scents, that's available at the bedside for the nurse to work out a schedule of therapy for the patient, and as the patient recovers, then the patient is able to make their own choices. Another app here is called Slow-Mo, and this one is designed to improve the effectiveness of cognitive behavioral therapy for people who are experiencing paranoid thoughts and suspicious thoughts. And the way it potentiates or leverages the therapy is that the patient is able to learn with the therapist what their triggers are and learns coping mechanisms to deal with worrying, paranoid thoughts. These are visualized as bubbles. The patient is encouraged through the app to slow down for a moment, hence slow-mo, and actually think, well, do I have to take the way that person looked at me as an aggressive thing, or were they just interested in the funny shirt that I'm wearing? Alternative ways of thinking about things. The patient is then able to shrink the bubble down and maybe change its color from one that says I'm worried about this to I'm kind of okay about this. And the app logs the experience and is usable then in subsequent therapy sessions. We're moving into wearable technology with this as well. This is a case of vital signs. I'm nearly at the end now. Vital signs recording, you can see that there's always a mess with cables. Those represent an infection hazard. There's also confusion and difficulty sometimes in recording data and actually acting on it. And there are often transcription errors in taking the written form and putting it into data. And the solution to that is a different vital signs trolley for human scale that retracts the cables inside itself and cleans them as it does so, and takes data entry directly on the tablet that's attached to it. Finally, nearly finally, we've done work on setting, if you like, generic design recommendations for manufacturers and designers about specific aspects of specific instruments and pieces of equipment. So the format of a number of these booklets which we created for the National Patient Safety Agency was that on the left-hand side, left-hand page, you show the problems that have been flagged up by patients and nurses and so on during the research. And on the right-hand side, the page, some general recommendations as to how we should design to avoid those problems. So I think really the two key elements that make inclusive design the powerful tool that it is are the focus on empathic, ethnographic, people research, people-centered research, so that's this one, and then running the learnings that are made from that research through a proper and controlled development process, which creates for us an evidence-based design. It takes us through a co-design process with our users, and then it takes us through a process of prototyping, mocking up, testing, finding out what's wrong, quickly iterating and gradually improving the, if you like, the fidelity of the prototype that we're working on until in the end, for example, with our ambulance, we made a working production quality interior treatment space.
Okay, thanks very much, Ed. I think it's very important to take into account, share stakeholders' vision on how things can work or should work. And those are, of course, in the first instance, the patients, and we will involve the European Patient Forum in the Nightingale project. Will also involve other patient groups, but specifically through the European Patient Forum. And of course there are other stakeholders, which will be the nurses and physicians working on the wards and the family for those patients that reside at home. But in any case, this has to be taken into account, and it will be an important factor during the testing phase of the project.
Based approach.
Yeah,
not
absolutely.
just looking at the product, but looking at processes and systems and services. Yeah.
Okay. Now it's my pleasure to ask Cor again, who will elaborate on the business plan behind Nightingale.